What's going up, YouTube? Welcome to another edition of Tips on the Beat with D.Royul, where I, D.Royul, will be making a beat, and I'm going to give you 5 insights into how I made it to hopefully give you some brand new, fresh ideas and outlook in how you're creating music in your own life. There's some reasons the episodes have been a bit more infrequent, but I'll explain that in weeks to come, so you'll just have to be patient. Today's episode is going to be one that actually came to me through another producer. He used to go by Experiment, but his name now is Cortland Urbano, was one of the 3 members of Beautiful Eulogy on the Humble Beast Recordings record label. Now, the reason why he went by Experiment is that his beats were pretty off the wall and out there sometimes. Like, you could listen to it and you'd eventually like it, but it would start out just kind of like, what in the world is this? And then you find yourself nodding your head along to it. I came across a few sounds that reminded me of some of the things I'd heard in some of his tracks. And I actually took an approach that was very off the beaten path of whatever I normally do as well. So in the spirit of Cortland, I was like, let me just make this whatever I feel. Whatever I feel like doing, I'll do it. And if it feels a little weird, embrace it. So enough of me telling you what the inspiration is. Let's see how this beat came together. Everybody, tip number 1. No chord changes are a solid foundation for a verse or any other part of a song. This beat I'm going for is for somebody to rap on. Sure, I've done many dynamic tracks in the past, but a lot of times if you want someone to be able to just rap on a beat, you make it really simple. And one of the simplest things you can do is stick with a chord and just rock it over and over again. Right now I played A sharp, also B flat, but that's one note, and I'm building everything around that one note. It's not going to change at all, and it creates a very simple bass line, a simple melody line, and everything going around it you become familiar with very quickly, because it is one thing, it doesn't change, and the person can really dive into what they're saying, and even the listener is not necessarily listening to the beat as opposed to what the artist over it will be saying. So you're laying a nice foundation for the artist to shine in a very particular way when you don't have chord progressions in your song. Number 2, don't quantize everything. For those who don't know what quantize means, it is something that is in digital audio workstations like Reason, Logic, Ableton, all of those, where you snap the notes that you've played to the time signature, or let's say it's 120 BPM, and now you've got your markers 1, 2, 3, 4. And any beats that are played, if you press quantize over quarter note, eighth notes, or like what's called 1/16, 1/8, all those numbers, it snaps what you played to the measure. And it makes it very, I won't say makes it very robotic, but it makes it very uniform, meaning you can count, it'll be on time, and anything like that. What I just did was hi-hats, and if I were to quantize them, it takes away the uniqueness of what it is. Sure, it's slightly off beat or off tempo, but I like the drag it creates. It creates a pretty sluggish feel in the beat, which I want to preserve. And had I quantized those hi-hats, it would have taken it away. So don't quantize everything. Play around with it. See what it sounds like with a little bit of the human factor in it. Tip number 3, think about the quarter note and eighth note connection. What do I mean by that? I talked about quantizing, which snaps things to the actual markers and the tempo of the track that you set. Now, when you set things to it, or you can quantize it to by the 4th, 8th, 16th, and these are lengths of notes, meaning how it interacts with the count of the song. Right now, the beat behind me, it's counting 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are called quarter notes because the entire measure is broken into 4. And you know how a dollar goes into 4 parts, each being a quarter. Eighth notes are when you break those 4 down into doubling this. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's how you get eighth notes, because there's 8 in the count. So the connection between the quarter and the 4th, clearly it's a division of it. But what I just played on the keyboard part, those were following quarter notes. There was an eighth note in there at the end just for the change, but it's so it's just following along with that count. And the first piano part I played is actually in eighth notes. So they're playing back and forth on each other. One is the stable count on the each of the 1, 2, 3, 4, and the other one's bouncing in between, and it gives this back and forth feeling between this piano sound that I've created. And so it's something dynamic, something diverse, but still it's not any chord changes or anything like that. So I found something to still make it a little bit more interesting without taking away that foundation that I created. Tip number 4, everybody. Take time to shape your chorus the way you want it to be. Believe it or not, this whole thing I just showed you took the most time out of making this beat. There are many people who are going to tell you if you can't knock out a track in a certain amount of time, then you're doing it wrong or you should throw it out, but everyone's life is different. Everyone has many different things going on in their lives. So not everybody can just sit down and work on beats all the time. Sometimes people have, all types of stuff. But for me, I knew with where this beat was heading, I couldn't just throw together anything. So I got ideas, but I spent a lot of time crafting these sounds. It's very purposeful, a purposeful progression, the sounds in it, the combination of which ones come in where, all of that stuff. I took a lot of time making sure that it sounded exactly how I wanted. So you do the same. You may do drills. Some people do beat drills like, hey, can I make one in 10 minutes? It's great. But if you really want to sit down and work on it, take the time and don't let anybody else tell you that your process is incorrect when it's your music. And actually number 5 is going to come right on the heels of number 4. Now that I've got the chorus together, I did the verse, I'm not really going to do too much to this. This is not going to be one of those dynamic tracks with changes here and there. So this is pretty much the skeleton. I'm just going to take a few things in and out. But one thing, number 5 is be mindful of high frequencies when you're doing songs that have a bit more, not a retro sound, but an older sound to it, or a further back, less modern desired sound you're going for. This isn't necessarily boom bap, it's not 90s rap, but I'm not trying to make it sound like it's something that came out right now. So a lot of songs that weren't out before the 2000s, the high frequencies weren't as crisp. So what I've gone in is I've tweaked with the high frequencies of most of the instruments that I've used here in Logic. just because of the sheer amount of tweaking that went into these instruments. I'm not going to break down every single thing that I've done, but one thing I will say is that for the snare, I put a guitar amp on it, which allows for you to mess with a lot of the frequencies, and most guitar amps don't have high frequencies, and I've already turned them down in this menu, as well as this amp cabinet lead that I used for that initial melody line for the synth line. In the actual instrument itself, I went in and I played with a lot of the frequencies here. Lots of knobs, lots of buttons, yes. And I put a lot of reverb on this as well. The tambourine sound, I cut the high frequencies in that. And so things like this, I went through all of the instruments and I did small tweaks to make sure that it didn't come through as crisp, because those crisp sounds give you a very modern feel to the track, and that's not what I was going for. And there you have it. Another episode of Tips on the Beat is in the books. Now let's go over the 5 things I talked about in this episode. Number 1, having no chord changes makes a very solid component in your track. Now for the verse and anything that wasn't the chorus, we just held it on one note. And by not having a chord progression, let's say go E, A, D, G, or something where it just pretty much rides that one note, it creates a solid foundation. It's very common in early hip-hop tracks and for rapping and such, where it's just something that you can vibe along to, and it creates a solid foundation for a rapper to be able to jump on. Number 2, don't quantize everything. Like I said in the beginning, this was came from a guy who was called Experiment at one point. And if it was weird, he embraced it. So that's what I did. I just put some things together, and if I liked how it felt, and it may not have been directly on the tempo or directly on the 1, 2, 3, and 4, I was fine with it. Number 3, understanding the quarter note and 8th note connection. When you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, that's quarter note, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's 8th notes. Recognizing how they work together and having different instruments playing on those different counting measures, they have a harmony. They have a connection, and seeing how it builds a track, or it makes a track feel a little more upbeat or up tempo or rising something that's in it. Play around with that to see how they make your track feel different. Number 4, take time to build your chorus. If you're having something without a lot of chord progressions, your chorus instantly becomes something to focus on. So take the time out to make it exactly what you want. Some people say if you take too long, then you should throw it away. I say take as long as you want. It's your music. And number 5, make sure that you're mindful of high frequencies. On this kind of a track, I was looking more into some of the early days of rap where it wasn't so crisp and all the digital instruments weren't so prevalent. So I cut a lot of the high frequencies out of it to give it more of that warm feel, to get not necessarily boom bap or 90s rap, but something that didn't sound too modern. And I was mindful of those high frequencies because I know the genre or the era of the music I was trying to emulate didn't have a lot of that as well. So thank you so much for watching this episode. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And you can go back and watch some of the earlier episodes to see how other beats have come together. If you are interested in purchasing this or any songs or any tracks that you've heard, make sure you contact the email in the description of this video. And remember, everybody, creativity has no boundaries. Use your God-given gifts and talents to create music in your own life, but make sure that you're having fun while you're doing it. See you next time.